So today we're going to be talking about forgiveness. So forgiveness and how it works. It's not quite like what people think, and it's not really about controlling it. It's about allowing it, and it comes from an understanding. It comes from when you've come through certain aspects of healing, certain specific situations, you arrive at a point of understanding. And at that point of understanding is where the forgiveness comes in. So it's less about saying, I have to forgive this person and I have to be okay with what happened, right? You don't have to be okay, and you don't have to control the forgiveness at all. It's something that happens for you and sort of to you in a good way. So for an example, say you grew up with a really difficult parent, right? Maybe they were narcissistic, maybe they were abusive, whatever your situation may be. So as you heal through the layers of that, right? Because there's not just one layer, there's many, many, many different layers of how that affected you, how you've been impacted by that long term. So when you're moving through all of those layers, you get little bits of forgiveness at a time. It's like baby steps, because you're not just going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden forgive somebody. Unfortunately, that does not work. Like, you can't just wish yourself into forgiveness unless you've actually processed the pain and the feelings that you had at the time when the issues occurred, which, as we've probably talked about before, you are not going to, many of us, when things happen at a young age specifically, although it can happen in adulthood as well, when something happens to you, most likely you're in shock. And you don't really know how to respond to that. So instead of actually feeling what you're feeling and processing through all of that, you become sort of numb to it. It's like a disassociation is what it's normally called. So we disassociate from the experience and the feelings associated to that, right? Which is why many of us may not even have actual memories of some of the things. Like we have what a lot of people call emotional flashbacks, where you have an emotional flashback of a situation that's happening currently, but it's your body is relating it to something that's happened a long time ago, and you're not quite sure how to function in that. So your body is just going backwards because it remembers, but it doesn't have a physical memory, which is really difficult for a lot of us if you do have a lot of like trauma or anything in your past. So when you have to stop disassociating is what it comes down to. In order for the forgiveness to actually happen, you're going to have to stop. You're going to have to stop disassociating. You're going to have to let that pain be there, and you're going to have to feel it. And you don't have to like relive the whole thing, but you have to feel what you repressed. You have to feel it. It's the only way to allow it to release out of you. And that's what makes space for the forgiveness. You are releasing the old pent up energies, and you're releasing them and allowing in the peace and the forgiveness, because you're finally free. You don't have to hold on to it anymore, right? Like so many of us walk around with that like huge rock on our shoulders, right? Where we are carrying the weight of all this pain and all this suffering. And it's because it's unprocessed, and you don't have to necessarily dig for it, but you do have to be open to that pain when it arrives and become curious about it. So that's the forgiveness is more of an understanding than it becomes it doesn't necessarily become an act, it becomes an allowance, because forgiveness is difficult for so many because we don't understand why something happened to us, right? We don't understand the bigger reason why something happened. And so it's hard for us to let that go because we can't rationalize, why did this happen to me, right? So we have these inherent beliefs that we are somehow bad and that we deserved it, or whatever belief structure you've adjusted to sort of justify what happened, even if that belief doesn't even, it's not a good one necessarily, where it's not helpful and makes you feel good, right? Sometimes we adopt those beliefs because what we're being shown is that there's something wrong with us, which is not really the case. So when we don't understand why something is happening to us, or something did happen to us, it's very difficult to forgive that, because, and I used to think that the why didn't matter, but I think it does actually. It's maybe not, it doesn't matter from like a spiritual concept, but it does matter to help your brain process through some of that. And so that's why there's certain things like where when you release certain emotions and you're releasing these traumas because you're actually like feeling them and healing them and working through them and being curious and learning to love those aspects of you, because you realize that they were just trying to help you. And I'm talking about the parts of you, not necessarily what happened. But when you understand why on the bigger scale, when you understand why something happened and you understand it literally had nothing to do with you, it's such a release. It is such a release. You are free from it and it feels amazing. So, for example, we'll go back to like the narcissistic parent, right? So you grew up with a narcissistic parent who was, inflicted a lot of pain. Maybe you have a lot of like psychological damage from that, because you have to, completely rewire your brain. When you have had narcissistic abuse of any kind, honestly, any abuse of any kind, doesn't matter. You're going to have to rewire a whole lot of stuff because so much is off, and it's not your fault. It's just because what was in reality was not was not what you were being told. And because you probably trusted the individual, that when you have that trust for somebody, you take on what they say over what you see. So you trust them more than you trust yourself. That's the first kind of like part of narcissistic abuse or abuse of any kind. You tend to believe the abuser more than you believe in yourself or believe yourself. And that's not necessarily like, that's not good, obviously, but what happens is as you kind of as you uncover all of these different layers to it, your understandings of why something happened, instead of coming from the victim mentality where I must have done something wrong, I was bad, I was this, I was that, you can transition out of that and into a larger understanding, which, you can kind of feel what's right for you as far as the the understanding part of like what your beliefs are on a larger like scale. So you can have beliefs about, say, if you believe in God, God, place this person in my path to help me outgrow blah, 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 blah. But if you can look at it from another point of view, that you placed them in your own path, that you wanted to experience from a soul perspective. You wanted to experience waking up out of a situation. Now, I know that's a little hard to digest at first because it's like, why would I put myself through that? That doesn't even make sense logically. But the only way that we grow, at least on earth, is typically through discomfort. So that person that made you uncomfortable was trying to move you, out of believing about yourself that you weren't good enough, that you weren't enough, that you weren't pretty enough, or whatever stories or whatever they told you to keep you submissive. But they're trying to move you. And you're not going to move if you're comfortable. That is a very, very, very large known fact as being a human, right? If we're comfortable, we're good. I don't need to move. But if you want to experience something on a soul level, you're going to have to be in situations where they're going to push you, and you're going to have to be the one to move. And that, I know it's a little hard to digest at first, but if you just kind of like take yourself out of that victim mentality for a minute, because that's where we get lost. We get lost in the victim mentality. And that's how the forgiveness stays. Or I'm sorry, that's how the forgiveness is not achieved. Because when we're victims of everything that has happened to us, you can't forgive that, because then that completely destroys the concept of being a victim, right? So you have to move out of that victim mentality in order for forgiveness to even become part of the equation. So I'm offering you another way of looking at it, so that way you can discover that there may be another way of looking at what happened in your situation and what you needed to grow up out of, what you needed to be pushed out of, basically, right? It's like your parent, oddly enough, say you had a narcissistic codependent, relationship. The narcissist is pushing you out of codependency by making you codependent. Sounds weird, but I swear it's because it makes you so uncomfortable, especially when you realize what's happening. It makes you so uncomfortable. It's just like it eats away at you. But it is also, you will get to a point, most likely, where you are done. You have nothing left to give, right? That's the changing point. That's when you decide to stop being a victim and you move. You move because they've pushed you. And you've had enough. And most people, I'm not going to say all, because everyone has the ability to make their own choices. Not everyone is going to move. Some people are going to find comfort in that. And that's okay. That's part of their experience, and that's fine. But you have to move if you want change. If you don't want to suffer, you have to move. And so when you look at it from the point of like whatever experience you went through that was very hurtful for you, it was trying to move you. It's trying to push you outside of your comfort zone, because the comfort zone is unhealthy, right? Your comfort zone is this narcissistic codependent relationship. That's the comfort zone. But if you just stayed there, you wouldn't grow and learn like you may want to, right? Because you get a choice how you get to manage this life. You're welcome to stay in that narcissistic codependent relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with the dynamic. What's wrong with it is if it goes against your core desires. If you desire to be free and you desire to have opinions of your own, to have a mind of your own, to live your own life, then a narcissistic codependent relationship is not going to be beneficial for those innate desires. And the innate desires are what's going to help you decide when you've been pushed to that breaking point. It's going to help you decide if you want to move or not. And so when you move out of that situation, that's where it starts. You start processing what happened to you. And that's a very difficult place to be because you're in a completely new place. But as you work through those steps of healing and you work through the time it takes to feel what it was like to actually be so degraded, and when you let yourself feel all of that, you start to see that you had all the power all along. You've always had the power to make your own choices, to live the life you want to live. And when you move out of that victim mentality, the forgiveness is born because you're no longer tying yourself to something that is not a part of you. So it literally just pops out. And it's going to do it in smaller amounts because you're not going to just like heal a big core wound, in one moment. Like it's going to take some time for it because your brain has to process it too. Like your body has to process it. Your brain does, your heart does. Everything that was broken by what happened to you has to heal, and it takes time. But the forgiveness comes as you release those things, because it literally evaporates out of you because you aren't holding the same mentality. You're not holding the same consciousness. So if you're holding a victim consciousness and you've found a more empowered state, that victim consciousness dissipates. So that's the forgiveness, is the letting go of that victim consciousness. And so now you have more of an empowered state, and that is what takes you to the next level. And then a little bit more of that victim consciousness leaves, and it goes on and on. And eventually you can heal from it. I mean, that pain will probably still be there. Like if you dig deep enough, it's still there. Sometimes you're going to be triggered by stuff, and that's okay. You're not trying to get to a place where you don't feel anything. You're just trying to get to a place where that empowered state outweighs that victim state. That's all you're trying to do. You're not trying to remove the victim completely, right? Because we have to allow that to be part of our life. It doesn't have to be part of your present, but you can let it be part of your past and say, like, it's okay that I was in this victim state for so long. And you have to be okay with that. And it will come with time, because you're going to probably be irritated with yourself when you find the empowered state that you allowed that to happen for so long. You're just gonna be like, what was I thinking? Like, that was so insane. What was I doing? But it doesn't, one does not negate the other. So because you're also still empowered when you're in victim state, you just don't realize it. That's all. So one doesn't negate the other. It's just you're trying to allow things to be of the past in the past, and the things of right now be right now. because I mean, it all kind of exists at the same level, to be honest. But the point is that you get to choose how you let it affect you, right? So that's the empowered state. You're choosing how you let what happened to you affect you. You're either going to let it run your life, or you're going to let it be what it is. And that's where the forgiveness is when you finally say, it is what it is. Like, you kind of, it's not that you don't feel, sometimes you don't feel upset about it, or it doesn't bother you sometimes that happened, because yes, it's messed up. Some stuff that happens to people is wrong, like just genuinely wrong. Like, and that's okay. But you can be at peace enough knowing that you don't have to live that anymore, that it's not part of your current moment, that it's gone now, and not gone, but it's allowed to be where it is, right? It can be motivation to keep moving you forward, or it can hold you back. So forgiveness is really more about letting things go, but from a state of bringing in new, right? So instead of trying to like erase the old, we bring in new. We bring in new ways of looking at things, new concepts. But the only way you're going to do that is if you process through the things that have been kind of like, you know, not holding you back, but the things that have been keeping you from living the life that you want. So when those things, there's literally no space for that to, like, your complete body changes, your cellular structure changes, the way your brain works changes. You actually have like a full chemical change when you forgive, or when forgiveness is part of your experience. And so there's no, it's very interesting actually, but it's just that there's no space for that, that kind of like old limiting concepts. They just can't live within your new structure, your new way of living. So it's not that they disappear, it's just that they don't exist on the same level that you're currently on, because you're never going to escape your past. Like, it's never going to be gone, and it's always going to be there as part of your life. But it doesn't have to hold you back. You can use it to say, like stepping stones, like I talked about a minute ago. Like, use what happened to you as a stepping stone. Be like, cool, well, like I overcame that, so great, I can overcome this. You know, use it to pump yourself up, to make yourself a better person, because that's where you want to be, right? Because you most likely, if you have any natural draw to healing anything, or to looking at your shadow, or looking at your pain and your trauma, that draw is because of the innate desire to be a better version of you, to push you to grow, to move, to expand. And that's where the forgiveness all works into it. So anyway, so I'll wrap this up, but I really hope this is helpful. And if you guys have any comments or questions, like, please leave them below. I'd also like to hear your thoughts. This is an open community. There's no right or wrong answers. Everyone's experiences are different. So yeah, so please share if you feel comfortable doing that. And I look forward to meeting you in the next section. All right, take care, guys.